Oh my gosh, guys, did you guys watch Family Guy last night? Neither did I. But I did watch The Walking Dead last night, so let's talk about that. Hey guys, David here. I'm gonna try to keep quiet because both of my parents are asleep. It's like 1 in the morning here as of this recording. But I am here to talk about episode 7 of season 4 of The Walking Dead, entitled Dead Weight. This is supposed to serve as a form of well, not so much of a companion piece, but a continuation, part 2 of the tales of the governor and what he's been up to ever since the ending of season 3, as we catch up with him being at the prison. And if you guys watched my last video, you guys would know that I loved last week's episode. I thought it was just an excellent new and fresh take on the governor, seeing what makes him tick and why is he doing the things that he did. And not only, I loved that we got a bit of a flashback without actually flashbacking to what happened before the outbreak, beyond that photo that he always carried around with him. I loved seeing that in the previous episode and seeing just the inner workings of him and seeing him more than just this villain that Rick and the group must take out. You know, I love that. So I was definitely looking forward to this episode, seeing the continuation of that, and eventually tying up to the ending of that last episode at the prison where we had him appear at the very end. And this is what that episode is. It's the last half of the tales of the governor, and it ends with him returning at the prison. And I gotta be honest, I'm a little disappointed. Man, what is with my shows? This past week, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. delivered its most disappointing episode, and now The Walking Dead? Guys, come on. It starts off when the last one left off with Martinez. That's his name. His name gets mentioned frequently in this episode, so now I know that it's Martinez. But they find him in the pit, they pull him out, and I love the way that opening sequence was cut together. You know, cutting to him being pulled out, to him talking to the little girl over chess, and I just loved it because it kept the suspense going. But then it felt a little anticlimactic to just show that, yeah, he just said, sure, I'll join your camp, and they're just at the camp. Although, we caught a glimpse at a tank, and I'm going to go ahead and mention this because I don't want to sound like a hypocrite, but I haven't read the comics. But even without having read the comics, I know that the governor and a tank mix well. So to have to have a tank period appear here, you know, the governor might find some sort of use for it. Let's just go ahead and leave it at that. And hopefully you guys who have read the comics know what I'm talking about. But then the majority of the rest of the episode is mostly just talk about surviving and how this camp is great, and the governor wanting something better, obviously alluding to the prison. And as he goes through these runs with Martinez, the asshole, I'm just going to call him that, asshole number, how many have we had on the show, and the 80s version of Charlie Sheen. And just like I mentioned how the first half of this story, which was last week's episode, served as a quote-unquote flashback without being a flashback to how the governor lived his life before the outbreak, this served as a flashback without wanting to be a flashback of how Woodbury got created. Because by the end of this episode, you realize that the governor's creating another Woodbury 2.0. It's like his Death Star. And as he goes on these runs with these guys, we start to see the old governor starting to blossom again, until eventually at the end of this episode, the governor, the bad guy, the monstrous psychopath, the murderous killer. That's redundant. It's late at night, okay? But he's back. The actual governor is back. No more of this soft guy who's playing chess with these little girls. No, he's gonna kill to protect this family, just like he probably has killed a dozen of other people trying to protect his actual family back in the day. That includes Martinez, which was one of the more pleasant surprises of the episode. Not only because, like I said, I was never a fan of that character, even though he wasn't that bad in this episode. You decide to make him not as bad as he was before, right before killing him. Wow, really? But his death was quite surprising, a little confusing, because I guess the governor killed him because he doesn't want to be offered the position of being in charge of anything, because he doesn't want it to happen. He doesn't want Woodbury to happen again. But somehow that triggers his psychosis. It's like a trigger word. Hey, you want to be in charge. And that just set him off. He knocked him out, pulled him into the pit, dropped him in there, and wow, I mean, it was quite a shocking scene to see, but it is a little confusing as to how all of a sudden he goes crazy just because he got offered a position to be somewhat in charge of this group. And then later he kills the Charlie Sheen lookalike, and then he tells his brother, the asshole, that, hey, you want to either join me or join your brother down there at the bottom of the lake, literally. Which props to the actor who played the asshole, because he was not only convincing as an asshole, but I like that at the end, after knowing that something's up with his brother and seeing that he's wearing his jacket, he's kind of like, my brother's dead. And actually hurt him. He wasn't like an asshole anymore. He actually looked like he was on the brink of tears. So props to the actor for, bringing some form of good quality to this episode through his performance. But he's already telling people that if they find other people, come back to the camp and let me know, which that instruction alone made me go, he's recreating Woodbury. I mean, it's the whole thing all over again. And that just made me think that one of the biggest flaws with this episode is that it just rushed the sudden switch from happy, chess player governor to psychopath. I just thought that transition from that to that just happened way too quickly within just one episode. This should have been spanned with at least another episode. And I think the main reason why they decided to keep it within one episode and possibly at the last second is because they probably predicted, and I understand that this was probably filmed months ago when they were filming the entire season, so it's not exactly recent that they filmed this. But I think they knew that the majority of the people who watch this show, were gonna go ahead and display some backlash towards this whole arc with the governor, because I was shocked to see all these comments on various other reviews of last week's episode saying, oh, this episode was so slow, they're running out of ideas, they're just spending it all on the governor, I want to see Rick, I want to see my Daryl. Yeah, there were people saying, I want to see my Daryl again. Really, you can't take a 2-episode break from them just to focus on another character, that way you can understand why he's the villain that he is? I mean, come on, guys. So something tells me that the producers knew about this and they went ahead and just rushed what should have been at least a 2-episode arc of having the governor go from what he said, a changed man, which I knew was bullshit from the beginning. But when he said, I'm a changed man, to now being back to what he was, that psychopath. I would have loved to have seen this transition be a lot smoother and just take its time, but it just got so compacted into just one episode that it just felt rushed to me. Guys, show developers, showrunners, please slow down. This is actually one of my biggest complaints from this past week's episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Just too rushed. Fortunately, by the end of this episode, I still enjoyed David Morrissey's performance as the governor. I still want to see what he does in the next episode. I still care about the family. I still cared for that little girl. And speaking of the family, and again, this piggybacks along with elements, more philosophical elements being rushed, such as the governor's arc. Could you have at least given us a hint that the sister, the spunky sister, was a lesbian? At least I think she's a lesbian, because she is pretty cozy with that other girl. I would have liked to have seen like hints of her being a lesbian and then eventually starting to get close with this girl, because I mean, I refuse to believe that they're just really good friends. I mean, from the look of how they're coming into contact with each other, I'm like, they're lesbians, come on. And even that, I would have loved to have seen that get developed more. That way I can care about her more. But it's, again, much like with the governor's arc, rushed. And once again, speaking of that sister, the sister that, not the spunky sister, but the other one that obviously has a relationship with the governor now, you're not gonna go ahead and notice some sort of connection of him saying, I'm gonna go survive, and then right when he says that, it turns out that what's his face is dead, the Charlie Sheen lookalike. I mean, this goes back to what I said in my last review, that this girl's sympathy and sentimental characteristics are going to be her undoing, and I get the feeling she's not going to last for long. But much like he was doing at the beginning of this episode, he decides to walk off thinking, like he always seems to be, and that is where we finally catch up with our folks at the prison. Well, not really, but basically we are caught up with the present timeline. He is now at the prison, and he sees Rick and Carl by the fence farming and stuff, and he decides to walk a few distance because he hears a few voices, and he finds Herschel and Michonne. And of course, once he lays eyes on Michonne, his gut tells him, pull out your gun, shoot that. And that would have been a great cliffhanger if it wasn't for the fact that we kind of know that he's not going to shoot her. I mean, sure, we understand of his gut instinct telling him to pull out the gun and just shoot her right there and then because of what he did, what she did through his eyes. At least I understood why he immediately pulled out the gun. But I know that he's not going to pull the trigger because, one, really kill off Michonne, or at least attempt at kill off Michonne. That doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make any less sense that the governor will go ahead and do a stupid move like that instead of thinking carefully. Because, I mean, we know that the governor thinks a lot and plans a lot. I mean, that's how Woodbury got created in the first place. And so he's not going to pull the trigger. He's going to go ahead and plan something out, which we'll probably see in the next episode. But he's just not going to do it. So it felt like a bit of an empty cliffhanger. What I think would have been enticing was if he did pull the trigger, if we hear a gunshot. We don't see what happens, but we hear a gunshot. That would have, made us go like, oh man, like, what's going to happen next? And therefore would have been a very satisfying cliffhanger. On top of that, him appearing just now at the prison and barely discovering the prison, I think that kind of go ahead and possibly rules out him being the one that was feeding the rats to the walkers, bringing them to the fence. Now, granted, that might, by this point, I don't think that really matters. This far into the show, it doesn't really matter who was feeding the rats. Chances are it was that girl because in the first episode she was shown feeding the walkers a rat. So chances are it was her. We didn't get exactly a good look at during that night shot. But we had our speculations that it was the governor, me included. But now knowing that he barely appears at the prison for the first time during what was the ending of that episode, especially after seeing Michonne and Herschel by themselves, especially since at the end of that episode Herschel said, "Yeah, I'll go with you to Michonne." That kind of clarifies that he probably wasn't the one feeding the walkers at the fence. So chances are it was that girl, but like I said, it doesn't really matter at this point. Overall, I liked the episode. It still had an awful lot of redeeming qualities that kept me watching this episode and makes me excited for the next one. But there weren't a lot of things that bugged me about this episode. I mean, I listed just maybe a couple. But those things, especially the rushed nature of the governor's arc, going from one extreme to another, well, not necessarily one extreme, but going from one state of mind to a rather extreme state of mind, a rather psychopathic state of mind. It was just a heavy burden on the episode and just knocked it down in terms of quality, especially after having such a great episode last week. And it's definitely, in my opinion, the first fumble for the season 4 of The Walking Dead. So because of that, I'm going to go ahead and give Deadweight a 7.9 out of 10, which is a C+. So I'll be back with my review of next week's episode, which, if it's anything like last season, I believe the next episode is the big mid-season finale, and it would make sense for it to be the mid-season finale, considering that we're starting to see some form of build-up of what's going to be the next move for the governor upon the prison. And a move like that could only be made for a mid-season finale. So chances are next episode will be the mid-season finale because it is episode 8, and the entire season is going to be 16 episodes, just like season 3, and Season 3 mid-season finale was episode 8, and then after that we didn't have Walking Dead until February. So if it is, then no Walking Dead reviews until February. But I will see you guys in the mid-season finale for The Walking Dead, and until then, take care.